of the free, and you'll know us by the trail of dead. It's just one more world war to complete the set. When you live by the pike, you die by the pith. You die wide-eyed, still pleading the fifth, or crying divine epithets and pathetic attempts at defense. All empathetic for those on your side of the fence. Well, I'll gladly put you and your legacy into an alternate tense of faltering senses and altered events. Like hun, it ain't a hearse, it's a reaper's stretch. Ah, how sweet, she said. Bunch of hordes in the street like it's Evil Dead, where the thin blue line meets razor's edge, and where the corporate ladder ascends to a steel-toed boot that awaits on the ledge. You'll be licking it fresh at your boss's request till it stomps each finger and watches you fall to your death and drown in an ocean of debt. Gone with the fodder who gathered to honor the patient left, who purity tested themselves into sections step by step till the next election, when it's just one them and the sound of their well-read theorized breath. That's harm reduction for the lowly cost of you holding your nose and just openly buying the theft. Maybe that's all in the flick of the pen. Maybe we're all one unmarked van from a trip to the pen, being guarded by pigs who exist on a diet of dying breaths of much worthier men. Honey, heaven's expecting you. Just don't get too hung up on who they let in. Just look up at the shine of the pearly gates. You don't need to worry if there's lead in the paint. You don't need to worry if there's lead in the water, lead in the milk, lead in the honey, lead in the caustic embrace of the Heavenly Father. Lead is the flavor of passive perpetual slaughter. Lead is the taste of us led to the ledge by the lure of the legend of expert consensus, and then beckon to stretch it just one step farther. And I hope all the folks who were boastfully gloating and toasting themselves as the heroes of COVID for boosting their boosters and doing their part are now equally thrilled to be starstruck martyrs, all laid in a government grave with anonymous markers, like you're back from the carvers and off to the splicer. You're the very first wave to be slain in the war against Pfizer, that 100 years war against Pfizer. They are thinning the crowd that is striking right now to bleed adequate pay from those inhuman misers, who all sit in their office and designate coffins to people regarded as nothing but profit for Kaiser. Still, the Dems want you nicer. Dems want you softer. Dems want you kinder. Yeah, they all want you graciously starving in silence. You will speak when you're spoken to. Rest of the time, you and all of us peasants are merely depressing statistics neglected in Congress's binders. All bled, bone dry, then fed to the grinder. Our headstones line each step as reminders. That's a lesson in object permanence learned in the furnace by workers consigned to the fire. Workers bled, bone dry, then fed by the fed to the grinder. Fed by the fed to the grinder. Now the Fed went straight to your head. Mind what you hide in your sighs unsaid, and your eyes turn blind to the signs unread. Flag bright red, so you let it in bed. You let it inside, and you'll see that it's fed. Never you mind that it grinds your wealth into bread for itself, then it bleeds you dry, then it dines on the dead. Now the Fed went straight to your head. Mind what you hide in your sighs unsaid, and your eyes turn blind to the signs unread. Flag bright red, so you let it in bed. You let it inside, and you'll see that it's fed. Never you mind that it grinds your wealth into bread for itself, then it bleeds you dry, then it dines on the dead. And the Fed went straight to your head. Mind what you hide in your sighs unsaid, and your eyes turn blind to the signs unread. Flag bright red, so you let it in bed. You let it inside, you'll see that it's fed. Never you mind that it grinds your wealth into bread for itself, bleeds you dry, then dines on the dead. The Fed went straight to your head. Mind what you hide in your sighs unsaid, and your eyes turn blind to the signs unread. Flag bright red, so you let it in bed. You let it inside, and you'll see that it's fed. Never you mind that it grinds your wealth into bread for itself, then it bleeds you dry, then it dines on the dead. Here's where our leaders would see us all led. Here's where our leaders would see us all led. Here's where our leaders would see us all led. Here's where our leaders would see us all led. The Fed went straight to your head. Mind what you hide in your sighs unsaid, and your eyes turn blind to the signs unread. Flag bright red, so you let it in bed. You let it it inside, you'll see that it's fed. Never you'll mind that it grinds your wealth into bread for itself, that it bleeds you dry, that it dies on the dead. Fed one straight to your head. Mind what you hide, and your sighs unsaid, and your eyes turn blind to the signs on red. Flag bright red, so you let it in bed. You let it inside, you'll see it, it's fed. Never you'll mind that it grinds your mind, that it grinds yourself, that it bleeds you dry, that it dies on the dead. Here's where our leaders would see us all led. Radio station just censored the word devil. Clearly, we are on a different level. I guess you wouldn't notice all the rolling boulders crashing past your shoulders when you're taught to shift your focus lower, scream at all the pebbles. Cheering on the bombers because you can't abide the rebels. But I bet you'll wring your bloody hands when all the dust has settled, when the last little limb is pulled from Gaza's twisted metal. Then you can say how you were led astray, and never once in all your days would you have knowingly supported all the genocide for which you clapped and prayed. But they baited you with unconfirmed blurbs about babies until you were filled with rage. Yet someone told you babies had been starving, bombed, and caged for nearly 80 years in Gaza, and you looked the other way. So regret, but make it fashion. Go and pluck that final petal off a hyacinth on Instagram for every kid they kettled. Every son that Israel imprisoned when they're little, that they tortured for a decade, then surprised with their acquittal. And when they got released and saw their parents, and whatever siblings hadn't met the missiles, they stared right through their middle. Their eyes don't seem to focus, and their words are all but dribble, like they're pondering the darkest riddle. That is, how many false flags does it take to make humanity inhuman and uncivil, distorted by the revel? The crooked slant where Israel contorts into America, Biden bathing Bibi in a bloodbath in the bevel. I opened up my feed and I saw children disassembled. Turned some music on and heard the station censor devil. Imagine thinking Doja Cat's a threat to moral fabric in the single largest terror cell that ever felled a temple, that ever sparked a cleansing, that ever burned a market, that ever raped with bayonets or carpet-bombed apartments, that ever turned your water off and left you in the darkness, left you doing surgery on children while they're conscious. You sing the devil's praises every time you sing our anthem. You sing a hymn to him that watched us birth a million phantoms. You'll proudly wave his flag, and yet you will not name the devil? Well, clearly, we are on a different level. I can give you names, shit, I'll give you several. They say the devil wears a different face for every general, like a composite of the char he brought to fields of emerald, and the wail of every childhood we made ephemeral. So who else has left the stain of blood on everything they touch? Who else can starve civilians and they don't so much as blush? Who else has paid for Gaza being flattened into dust? If there's ever been a devil on this earth, then it is us. That's U.S. What an ugly couple letters. Feeding shit and ignorance to those it chose to tether. From the river to the sea, both are slowly growing redder. For the devil that you know just knows you better. It knows every gut reaction it could ever make you feel. It knows fear is that which wakes you up and gets you on your wheel. It knows just the kind of story that will justify its war. And the scripts are wrapped for World War IV. So just imagine my surprise to give the radio a listen and to hear such pious morals out of Zionists and Christians that they'd take the devil's name and try to clip it from existence while they carry out his bloody business. You would wave a fascist flag, and yet you honor not your Iblis? Name you not Apollyon? Hush you now your witness? Bleed the name of Belial till tongue is rolling listless in the man-made mouth of Mammon, as Lamia's whispers listen. When carts are wheeling bodies through the cities that we crushed, and the very air is rotten with decay of all that was, who else would censor devil yet behave as Legion does? If there's ever been a devil on this earth, then it is us. U.S., but not a unity of souls. More a mass of corporations turning houses into holes, turning people into puppets, turning puppets into mold, turning mold into nutrition bars worth their weight in gold because they're bombing every bakery and burning every field with phosphorus that never once has wanted for a meal. The devil wears a mask and it delights in the reveal, in that moment where the face is let to peel. We do not love the underdog. We do not cheer the rebels. We lust for all their blood until the dust has finally settled. Then pity just ourselves that we were so misled to revel. Proudly wave his flag, and yet we will not name the devil.
Who are these people?
Who are these people? Yeah, I got this guy here. It's not just me. Hi, everyone. What's up? It's Indy and it's Reef, and we're live. It's how do we miss that? Because it's Sunday night at 10, so it's time for that. Next weekend we will not be doing a live show because I'm going to be on vacation with the fam. So we're going to get this one in. This is our quote unquote Halloween show. So let me change my tie to the spooky orange. I can do that real quick. No, I got to wait for this thing now. Damn it.
Okay. See when you tried to be extra.
My stream deck freezes.
Try to be extra.
Go. Now we're going to be orange. Ooh, spooky orange. Yes, Golden Monarch, we're orange for Bitcoin. Ha, 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 ha. No, we're not. Fuck Bitcoin. Hi, everybody over on Substack that's watching. Seems like there's a lot of people over there. Thank you for watching. Good to see everyone there. And we're going to do a news show tonight about Venezuela and then about Israel and all the war crimes that they're pulling just this week, because we do that every week. It's a fuck Israel segment. But this time, like 3/4 of the show is going to be fuck Israel. So, I mean, that's just the way the news is going, unfortunately. I would, otherwise you're talking about ICE or you're talking about the political stuff that's going on in this country, the shutdown of the government, and there's plenty other people that are covering those things, honestly. And what I don't see enough coverage of still is the devastation that's happening in Gaza, of the nonsense, quote unquote, ceasefire that's not really a ceasefire, and all the other stuff. You had a pretty good INN News with Colin on Wednesday night, right?
Yep.
Last night we had, go ahead.
Talk about Venezuela.
Yes, you did.
Did all that. Yep, talked about the stuff that's happening in the UK with Palestine Action people that were arrested. So,
right, and not just
if you
arrested.
didn't
Now
go
they
see
were
that, go check that out.
36 minutes, no jury. Right, that was the segment.
Yeah.
Right. Craig Berry wrote
Yes,
that
it
one.
is.
So yeah, we're gonna do a long video tonight. I don't normally do that, but there was a really good video from Double Down News about October 7th. And of course, that's long since put to bed, but we're going to go through this video and watch the whole thing and kind of critique it. But yeah, that's going to be a good time. Well, not really a good time. It's going to be fucking horrific. And yes, Fred Edward, fuck Israel, as we always say on the show. Vicky Adams, good to see you. Thank you for posting about justice for Aspen. We are going to talk about that as well. I put out a post earlier today on Substack, and we talked about it last week also, but we are hosting a live stream fundraiser on Wednesday night in place of INN News, starting an hour earlier at 8 p.m. Eastern. That's going to feature Misty Winston having a conversation with Halo and Aspen. I believe we're going to have Descent in Bloom joining us as well to talk about Georgia prisons, as well as autism in prisons, and the research that she's done since she's learned about Aspen's case. And we're going to talk about, and then we're going to have a special Jessie Jett American Tradition concert, which will be really cool. Jessie's going to play a set that has been requested by Aspen and her family and Halo. And then we're going to open it up and we'll allow for people to request things if they put something into the GoFundMe. So that way we can have some fun, we can raise some money, and everybody wins. So before we get started, I know things are really tough. Thank you, Ralph Mejia, this week for hooking us up. But things have been a little tough around here, too. So if you're able to, at a means, please support independent media. The ways to do that are with Cash App, $ Indie News Network. You've got ko-fi.com/Indie News Network. With paypal.me/Indie News Network. If you do that as friends and family, there's no fee. Our website is indienewsnow.com. That's our news website. There's a section over there to keep the news free, and you can Stripe post over there and tip there. And then we're live over on Substack at indiemediatoday.com. You can subscribe annually or monthly there, and as well as over at INN's Substack at innnewsletter.com. So we have got a long lineup of stuff to get to. A lot of Indie Media Award honorees tonight, too. I when in doubt, you go to the best of the best because you're going to find stuff that you can rely on. And that's why we put those together in the first place. So the first story we're going to get to is not, well, let me fix one thing first. It's not an Indie Media Award honoree, but a top independent journalist, Arturo Dominguez over at Decolonized Journalism, does a hell of a job. And he's been doing it a long time for Unicorn Riot, for a bunch of other independent outlets, and on his own as a freelancer at Decolonized Journalism. Now, he put in experts denounce intervention in Venezuela as the U.S. military buildup continues. I don't think that's much of a surprise to anyone, right? Experts condemn the U.S.'s recent actions in the Caribbean, its threats against Venezuela, and its history of coercion in Latin America. That's a kind way of saying regime change, right? So we know what's been happening. Last week, three United Nations specialists in human rights, extrajudicial executions, and the international order issued a statement denouncing the U.S.'s actions against Venezuela. How many boats have been bombed now, like just out of the water? I think we're up to 10, Reeve?
7 or 8, I think. Yeah, something like that.
I thought we were up to as many as 10.
I've not kept count specifically, but
that could be. All right. The experts decried the covert and clandestine actions that the U.S. is employing while condemning the history of similar interventions and the lasting harm the United States has done over decades in Latin America. Fair. The experts are now warning of the dangers of U.S. military buildup. We're going to talk about that in a second. That the recent announcements by the White House regarding the use of lethal force in international waters are without legal justification, for sure. And that possible covert or direct military action against Venezuela constitutes a violation of the UN Charter, which they don't give a shit about. They essentially called out the United States for fabricating enemies to justify a supposed right to defense, resulting in extrajudicial murder in the Caribbean. Yeah, that's what's been happening. Quote, covert action and threats of using armed force against the government of Venezuela by the United States violate Venezuela's sovereignty and the UN Charter.
Yep.
Yes. And Trump doesn't seem to give a flying fig, as the revolution continues, just pointed out. When did the U.S. ever care about the UN? I don't know.
Right.
Good day, Harps. Good to see you everywhere. Marlon Weems, how are you, sir? All right. So, according to this statement, the experts have been in contact with the United States and have urged leaders to cease unlawful attacks and threats, and respect international law and reaffirm its commitment to multilateralism.
Whatever that means.
And then it continued to prompt them with a strongly worded letter to adhere to the purposes and principles of the UN Charter that they wipe their ass with daily. A request that the admin seems willing to ignore, obviously, based upon the deployment of the aircraft carrier Gerald Ford and its strike group to the Caribbean. Right? The USS Ford's carrier group, which includes 5 destroyers and is currently deployed to the Mediterranean, adds the additional troops sent to Trinidad, adds to the additional troops that were sent to Trinidad and Tobago. Allegedly, they're also now talking about using Puerto Rico as another base for this operation, potentially. The USS Gravely, which will later be followed by the U.S. Marine Corps' 22nd Expeditionary Unit, blah, 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 is officially in Trinidad and Tobago to conduct military exercises over several days and is set to leave on October 30th. It should be noted that Trinidad is just 7 miles from the Venezuelan coast at its nearest point. Now, what's really interesting is I remember when there were other military exercises happening in the Baltic Sea right around the summertime of 2022. And about 3 months later, Nord Stream went kaflooey. So could there be some operations happening underwater too? Quite possibly. Look for an internet cable possibly to be cut. Statement from the UN experts came just 3 days after the UN Security Council warned of mounting risks to regional peace after the extrajudicial killings of alleged drug smugglers and fishermen. I wouldn't even call them alleged because the only person that's alleged who they are is the Trump admin. But they've produced no receipts and no no evidence at all. So how can you say that they're even alleged? It's literally just blatantly accused by the Trump administration without evidence. 3 experts are George.
Provided zero to anybody.
Right.
Trust us.
Just trust us, bro.
We killed this guy, but he was horrid.
We took out that boat. It was terrible. It was covering drugs. It was carrying drugs, fentanyl, cocaine, even though cocaine doesn't really come from Venezuela. That's a whole other story. Right? So you have your 3 experts here, right? You got one who is an independent expert on promoting a democratic and equitable international order. Okay. You've got Ben Saul, who's a special rapporteur on the promotion and protection of human rights and fundamental freedoms while countering terrorism. Right? And then you also have another special rapporteur, this one on extrajudicial summary of arbitrary executions. So you seem to have a team of experts that know what they're talking about when it comes to this stuff. That are all saying that, yeah, this is a problem, that they're violating sovereignty, that they're breaking whatever international laws and treaties we've all signed to and agreed to mutually, but for whatever reason, we're just allowed to violate it. And there are no consequences, there are no repercussions, and it just happens. At some point, there might be repercussions, but we haven't seen any happen quite yet. Now, if what we have seen in repercussions is in trade, in people moving their business away from doing business with the United States, in BDS, effectively. Also because the tariffs have made it to the point where they really have no choice but to seek elsewhere in some cases because we've made U.S. goods too expensive for them. Right? So that's the first half of what's happened in Venezuela. The second half of it came from an indie media award honoree at Anti-War, Dave DeCamp. And this happened the other night. U.S. flies B-1 bombers near the Caribbean in the latest provocation aimed at Venezuela. I listened to somebody talking about how they just want to get Maduro, how they just want to get the oil. But I seem to recall Maduro basically offering them the oil, if I'm correct.
Correct.
So it's not just about the oil. They also want a puppet that they
Maybe
have
not all of it.
that they can control and is
Yeah, they
friendly
want
to
complete
them.
control.
Sure
Yeah.
they do. But I think that it's more about getting rid of Maduro because he's perceived to be a socialist, even though he's more authoritarian. But he was also, he was elected. He won an election last year that everyone else in the world certified and signed off on, and their Supreme Court. People are like, oh yeah, the Supreme Court that's friendly to him or whatever. No, they're Supreme Court. They have independence, but yeah, it's crazy to me that. So we're flying 2 B-1B bombers over the Caribbean on Thursday in the latest provocation in the region aimed at Venezuela. Right, but it's not just Venezuela. I think they also want to provoke Petro, because Petro in Colombia has also been pretty outspoken against Trump, right?
Yeah. Yep. At least recently.
Right. A U.S. official told the Wall Street Journal, boo. So take it with a grain of salt. A, because it came from a U.S. official, and B, because it came through the Wall Street Journal, that the bombers took off from Dyess Air Force Base in Texas on Thursday and flew near Venezuela. When asked about the report, Trump said it was false, but the bombers were spotted on flight trackers, and other U.S. officials confirmed that the flight took place. So, like usual, somebody's lying, and it's usually Trump, as usual. Right? Last week, the U.S. flew 3 B-52 bombers near Venezuela in what the U.S. Air Force called a bomber attack demonstration mission.
It sounds like what fucking Reagan used to do. Fly by Russia and shit. You know? Like, same kind of shit.
U.S. Special Ops helicopters have also flown within 90 miles of Venezuela as part of a major U.S. military buildup in the region, which has involved the deployment of 8 naval warships so far. Provocations come amid reports that the U.S. is preparing to bomb Venezuela. What did they do, again, as a sovereign nation to justify being bombed? I guess they don't have to do anything anymore. And as Trump is threatening to launch strikes against alleged drug shipments on land, they still have yet to produce again any evidence about any kind of drug trafficking. While it is the pretext for the military campaign, U.S. officials have been clear that the real goal is regime change in Venezuela. I seem to recall doing a report that Victoria Nuland went to South America last year, and for us saying literally, watch this space for a regime change operation. I honestly think that this was started under Biden / Harris, and that this was just continued by the Trump administration. This was already on the books and planned. The U.S. has also bombed at least 7 alleged drug boats, again, alleged only by the U.S. without evidence, in the Caribbean, and 2 in the Eastern Pacific near Colombia. Like I said, they are also going after Petro. This is personal. The U.S. War Department, the Department of War, has provided...
So stupid.
Thank you. No evidence to back up its claims about what the vessels were carrying, or to back up its assertion that the people it has been killing are narco-terrorists, a term that the administration has been using to justify extrajudicial executions at sea. And support antiwar.com.
Fucking whatever.
Support Dave DeCamp.
Yeah, go do that.
He actually did a 1-hour sit down with Ryan Christie at Last American Vagabond yesterday. And it was the first time they've ever done an interview together. They were like, Ryan, it came out during the interview that Dave's like, I was looking it up, and it's like, have we done? amazingly never happened before. So hopefully it won't be the last. It was a really good sit-down conversation between the two of them. Those are two of the guys that I rely on most for what's really happening in the Middle East, in Venezuela, with the duopoly and the two-party illusion that they're trying to push forth. So again, Last American Vagabond and antiwar.com. Go follow them both. Support independent media. We amplify and talk about independent sources here, like Arturo, like antiwar.com. And because we do so, we are not monetized by YouTube. And therefore, we ask you to support us in other ways. If you can do so, the best ways to do that are at Cash App, $ Indie News Network, over at ko-fi.com/Indie News Network. You see them all up on that slide there. That's our wall of fame. All these amazing people have already supported our channel. We really love you and so grateful for everyone that can do that. I know times are really tough right now. PayPal.me/Indie News Network if you got PayPal. At IndieNewsNow.com, there's a way to put in a credit card or Amazon Pay or basically any other way you can think of through Stripe. And then we've got our Substacks. We're live over at IndieMediaToday.com. Hello to everyone watching over there. And then I just waved to my screen, even though you can't see me because I'm a tool. And then INNNewsletter.com. That's the network's newsletter where we put out a weekly update of all the activity that happens from everybody at the network. And a couple of podcasts like INN News goes live over at INN Newsletter on Wednesday nights. And Angel in the afternoon, actually he goes to his. Boats goes live at INN Newsletter, and also Jesse Jet. And those are all podcasts over there, as well as INN One-on-One. When I do a one-on-one, that'll go over there, and it's its own podcast that you can download and watch and listen to over there. All right. So we have gone past the Venezuela part. Now we're going to get to this Double Down News video that I found and that I think is really powerful. All right, let me turn the slideshow thing off and we're going to go to this view here. All right, perfect. So we're going to watch a few minutes of this and then I'll pause and then we will we'll go back to it and we'll get through this whole thing. You gotta do it manually
because he hates slideshows.
I do.
He hates the slideshow. He never wants to touch them. So.
Harps, get your mind out of the gutter, brother. I don't do anything untoward on screen. I am a very good man, and I have pants on. Just for anyone who was wondering. Family show, folks. All right.
Sorry, children.
Let's watch this video. That again, Indie Media Award honoree, Double Down News, top outlet from 2022 inaugural class. IndieMediaAwards.substack.com. You can find all the honorees from all three classes there. We're not going to do one for 2025. I don't really think that there's enough new people that I found that I'm really comfortable doing that with this year. And maybe we'll bring it, dust it off next year or whatever it is. But I do like Double Down News for the most part. They've had a couple of slips here and there, but this one is a really good video. And this breaks down exactly what went down on October 7th, because there's a lot of questions. So before we get into the video, there's a tweet that accompanies this. And the tweet says, former Israel Defense Minister Yoav Gallant admits to using the Hannibal Directive to attack and kill Israeli captives on October 7th. Okay, completely ignored by Western media. 28 Apache helicopters used all ammunition and had to be reloaded. This is what really happened on October 7th. So, with that premise...
At Al Jazeera's investigative unit, we've conducted a forensic, meticulous examination of the events of October the 7th. We uncovered very real crimes committed by Hamas and others. But I think what was perhaps most significant were the crimes we discovered that did not happen. And it's hugely concerning that these revelations have been virtually entirely ignored by the Western press. What's extraordinary is the Israelis were aware of the plans. Hamas were actually training quite openly for this operation, and they were actually placing the training videos online so anyone could view them. On the very night of October the 7th, before dawn, spotters along the fence are reporting back to headquarters, and the head of Shin Bet and the head of military intelligence take this seriously enough that in the middle of the night they're up and talking to each other, and they conclude it's just another training exercise. And what is extraordinary is that they don't even raise the alert level to number 1, the most basic alert level that have made a huge difference.
Red
and
alert.
They don't do that, which means that when Hamas bursts through the fence at 6:30 in the morning, they catch many of the defenders in their beds. I mean, you can see many of the soldiers are killed in their beds. Hamas had anticipated most of their fighters would be killed trying to get through the fence. In fact, only a small number were killed trying to get through the fence. They were as much taken by surprise as anyone by the performance of Israeli intelligence and the Israeli military. Crucially, also, they were taken by surprise by this very large music festival that was taking place, which they don't seem to have been aware of. Having overrun the military bases, the game plan was to grab hostages and take them back. And they do this on a large scale, but they also clearly kill very large numbers of unarmed civilians as well. The Israelis were then extraordinarily slow to respond. Now, they scramble Apache helicopters, but there's no ground control. It's pretty clear that in the chaos, some hostages at least were hit by Apache helicopter fire. We've identified 27 people who were clearly taken hostage, taken captive, and were taken away from their homes, but never made it to the fence, died somewhere between their homes and the fence. There's a fair chance that a number of them were killed by Apache helicopters. Within the kibbutzes, we've identified 18 people who were pretty much certainly killed by the police and the army as they arrived. 12 of them a specific incident in kibbutz Be'eri, where you have a large number of gunmen, around 40 gunmen, holed up in a house with 13 hostages. A tank is brought in and opens fire on the house. There are 2 survivors from this incident, which is why we know about it. There may be other incidents we don't know about because everyone was killed, but there are 2 survivors from this who spoke to Israeli media. There's a common sense thing. You just have to look at the scale of the destruction, and it's clear that 1,200 men armed with rocket-propelled grenades and machine guns did not do all of this. The Hannibal Directive, which was something that was developed in the 1980s by the Israelis, and it was basically to avoid situations where their enemies would capture 1 or 2 or 3 Israeli soldiers and then effectively hold them to ransom. There was one occasion where the Israelis released over 1,000 Palestinian prisoners in return for a single Israeli soldier. So an order was issued whereby they said, it's better that we kill everyone than allow people to be captured. Now, this was supposedly rescinded several years ago, but at midday on October the 7th, the army revived the Hannibal Directive, put it into effect. 70 vehicles were hit. At least in some of the cases, everyone in the vehicle was killed.
The Israeli military does not deny the report.
The peculiarity of the days after October 7 is that the Israeli media and subsequently the international media choose to focus not on the very real and extensive crimes that Hamas and others did commit, but on crimes they did not commit. And this had 2 focuses. In the days immediately after, it's to do with babies. The most dramatic one is we see an allegation that there were 40 babies killed, many of them beheaded. This is very simple to deal with because we have a comprehensive list of the dead. We know that 2 babies are killed on October the 7th. One is an 10-month-old child who is hit by a bullet fired through a safe room door. The other is a child who dies after an emergency cesarean, a Bedouin child, in fact. Now, any story about babies that does not relate to those 2, and there are a lot of stories about babies, is not true. We know it's not true. This has enormous implications for the other wave of atrocity stories that began very quickly, which is to do with sexual violence, and particularly the Israeli assertion that it was widespread and systematic. To be clear, in the film, we are not saying that there were no rapes on October the 7th. We simply don't know. What we are saying is that there simply is not the evidence. There's not the forensic evidence, there's not the visual evidence, there's not the photographic evidence, and there is not the witness evidence to support the allegation of widespread and systematic rape. The Israelis have this strange system where they farm out the collection of bodies after disasters and terrorist attacks and so on to an organization called Zaka, who are ultra-Orthodox religious volunteers. They collect the bodies, prepare them for religious burial and so on. A character that many people will have seen in the days afterwards is Yossi Landau, who was the southern commander of Zaka, who was on television a great deal. He said,
the 2 piles of 10 children each were tied to the back, burned to death.
You then see a phone call which Netanyahu makes to President Biden, where he repeats this story. In fact, he embellishes it.
They took dozens of children, bound them up, burned them, and executed them.
Terribly important, this, because it was entirely untrue. We know the house he's talking about.
I've seen the video, Jack.
House in Kibbutz Be'eri, which was the house that was stormed by Israeli police and military, and where it is almost certain that all of the hostages were killed by the Israeli police and military. There were 2 children there, 2 twins, but no other children, so we know the story is untrue. Mr. Landau told a number of other stories. There's one particularly notorious one about the fetus being cut out of a pregnant.
This fucking guy, okay, this Yossi Landau guy is the worst, okay? Like, he's admitted multiple times that he lies just to be able to engender some kind of sympathy for whatever cause he's doing, all right? And then 3 weeks later, after the story's already gotten out and everyone's yelled at him that wasn't what happened and show us the evidence, we made it up. Again, it's the story about a lie can make it around the world 10 times before the truth has had a chance to put its pants on. That is exactly what these people at Zaka exploit all the time. Yes, Seven Sign, every accusation is an admission, okay? And Revolution continues. They made up these stories ahead of time. They knew that they would need them. That's right. They have, and not only that, but the fantasies and the crap that they make up, only the sadistic kind of people like them would even conceive of stuff like that. Because every report that we've gotten
talked about that before, right?
All the hostages
where
that come back.
All the times they worry about what Palestinians are willing to do to others. You know, it's like the Israelis' idea of like, it's just like here where the majority, right, gets upset at the minorities if they become the majority because like of what the majority did to those minorities. It's exactly what's happening here, where Israel's done unspeakable things to Palestinians, and they're worried about if Palestinians ever, by grace of God alone, like become in power, what they're willing to do to Israelis. And it's like they show it every time. Their own fear is what's projected. You know, this is what they think of doing to people. You know, clearly.
Right.
Like,
it's ridiculous. This guy Yossi is infuriating. And again, this guy is like Shmuley level infuriating, I would call. You know, like he's a troll. Right. And he goes in and he's personal friends with Bibi, and he's under instructions to craft like the most disgusting, fear-mongering story, rage-inducing, however much truth you have to include or not. We don't care. Just get everybody angry and enraged. And he does it.
Yeah.
Woman.
The baby that was connected to the cord was stabbed.
Just lies.
And she was shot in the back.
We simply know this is untrue. The list of the dead show there's no such victim. Mr. Landau said, you know, I have a picture of this atrocity.
If you want to see the picture, I have the picture of it.
This is the baby.
I'm sorry to be graphic here, but I can't see a baby here.
You can't see the baby.
Why are you showing me a
this is the picture of the
photo right
mother.
now?
It was a piece
number
of
one. Number
charred
two,
flesh.
they're not showing it to us. They're showing it to him. He's showing it to that guy. Like, but we don't get to see it.
The videos of October 7th. It's It's so bad that
psychologically, I'm not quite sure why he offered to show me a photo that he didn't have. I'd point out as well that Zaka was an organization that was in trouble. There had been a major scandal. Its founder had been accused of child sexual abuse. There was a financial scandal.
Of course.
To be cooking
He's in Israel.
It's raised an awful lot of money since October the 7th. These stories were clearly useful, and they were useful to the Israeli government. In the film, we see Benjamin Netanyahu visiting Zaka volunteers and thanking them for talking to the world's media and stressing that this is another front in the war. Why does this matter? Why does it matter whether this type of atrocity was committed, but not that type? People were killed in this way, not that way. It matters because the murder of babies and widespread rape has a particular resonance. It's particularly triggering. The Israeli government and its supporters, when they justify the brutality of the subsequent bombardment and invasion of the Gaza Strip, again and again and again, what they always reference is babies and rape.
Young girls who were raped and then murdered.
Women brutally raped and murdered.
Little kids who are beheaded.
Pictures of terrorists beheading children.
Yep.
These bastards put these babies in an oven and put on their oven. We found the kid a few hours later.
This is
Also
something
a
you've seen
lie.
in previous conflicts as well. If you want to dehumanize an enemy, if you want to desensitize
propaganda
to the suffering that is inflicted on that enemy, then you portray them as barbarians, basically as savages, as people who are not deserving of humane treatment. And that's why it's relevant. That's why it's important to pick apart. A lot of the world's leading media outlets have done in-depth investigations.
Sounds of the
where they have
South,
concluded
that
there was
kind of
widespread,
shit.
systematic, instrumentalized, weaponized rape. The New York Times makes a particular feature of the story of a young woman. She was killed early in the morning, 9 miles north of the music festival site, as she and her husband were fleeing. The New York Times, in its big December investigation into sexual violence, leads with this, and about a third of the article consists of her story. And it's immediately undermined because the woman's sister then posts on Instagram immediately afterwards, this isn't true, we know she wasn't raped. She was texting us until minutes before her death. It's also the case that her husband had a lengthy phone conversation immediately after her death with his brother, and again, made no mention of rape. So it's very important that, because it's the central, most compelling piece of information in one of the biggest investigations done by one of the world's most prestigious media outlets, the New York Times, and it turns out not to be true. It's done by 3 journalists. One of them turns out to be somebody who worked in some capacity for Israeli intelligence previously, who has virtually no journalistic experience, and who had liked genocidal media posts. It's very interesting with Anna Schwartz. She gives an interview in Hebrew to an Israeli channel. She actually lays out how difficult they were finding it to find evidence that they were talking to all the hospitals and all the psychiatric clinics and so on, and that there was simply no evidence at all. There were no witnesses that come forward, no victims had come forward at all. I think she's telling this as if to show what digging they had to do, but it's actually very revealing. In the end, it's quite clear they fall back on the same sources as everyone else: Israeli government officials, IDF officers, and first responders, all sources which were discredited by the baby stories. So no babies were beheaded, no babies were thrown into ovens, and there is no real evidence for widespread and systematic rape. Now, it's very clear why the Israelis might want these stories to circulate. What's less clear is why very reputable Western news and media outlets should swallow them so uncritically, particularly given the track record of the Israeli government and the IDF, which has been shown again and again and again in the past to have been less than
This is what that whole thing was fucking discredited completely.
And this one, the dancing girl.
Well, this mission is urgent. We will continue to
Fucking
fulfill it with
wild.
care and with a commitment to the sanctity of life, both Israeli and Palestinian.
The response to our film, October the 7th, has been interesting. The response is not to criticize and to pick apart and say we've got it wrong. They don't do that at all. What they do is they simply ignore you, which on one level I take as a compliment, because I think there are all sorts of people out there who would very much like to pick apart what we're doing and to destroy it and discredit it. And I think they take one look at it and decide they can't really do it. So what they do, which in a way is even more damaging, is just to entirely ignore us. This is significant because so often what we are doing is critiquing the way the mainstream media has covered the story, which may well be, of course, precisely why the media doesn't want to look at what we've done. So in a way, the treatment of this in many ways echoes the treatment of our earlier series, The Labour Files, which offered a critique of the dominant media narrative about Corbyn and the Corbyn years on the anti-Semitism crisis. The allegation of anti-Semitism clearly is a very powerful weapon that can be wielded in defense of the Israeli state. I think sometimes, particularly by the Israeli state, it is wielded very cynically and very deliberately.
When the ICC investigates Israel for fake war crimes, this is pure anti-Semitism.
What about real war crimes?
It's not the case in Western media and Western societies that you cannot criticize Israel. You can.
I'm about to show
Well, they're Israel. They never commit real war crimes.
I'm about to show some. That's one right there.
What you cannot do is to question the fundamental philosophy of Zionism. What you are not allowed to do is to say what all Palestinians would say. Israel is a state whose defining feature is and has always been that it is structured to ensure the domination of one ethnicity over another, that it is in effect an apartheid state, which is what all of the world's human rights organizations now describe it as. The enormous peculiarity and dysfunction of Western media with Israel is not only does it not say that, you're actually not allowed to say that. And this renders criticism of Israel perilous terrain. People are very on edge. They're very aware that they're straying into dangerous territory. They're very aware they have to choose their words terribly carefully, otherwise they will be misconstrued. You can see this happening at its worst.
Or they'll be shot in the throat.
Where particularly Jewish people are far, far more likely to be suspended and expelled for anti-Semitism from the Labour Party than non-Jewish people. But there is something more fundamental that goes on, which regards the Palestinian people as a whole. Once you have tainted them with the stain of anti-Semitism, you have opened the door to, you have facilitated the dehumanization of Palestinians, which is the psychological prerequisite of Israeli brutality towards the Palestinians and of Western complicity in that brutality. Palestinians will often make the point that they did not choose who their occupier was, who their colonizer was. So in fighting back, yes, they are inevitably fighting back against Zionists and Jews. It doesn't mean they're anti-Semitic. One has to ask oneself the question, are we really saying that if they had been colonized by Greeks or Italians, they wouldn't be resisting their occupation? Of course they would. 36 Israeli children were killed on October the 7th, and this understandably got widespread international media coverage. At this stage, I think over 14,000 Palestinian children have been killed. And you would expect the outrage and the coverage to be proportionately greater, and it's not. In future, people will look back at what is being done, which is essentially the flattening of a whole series of towns and the mass murder of thousands and thousands of unarmed civilians, almost half of whom are children. And they will be absolutely bewildered by how the West allowed this to happen under its very noses with weapons that were being supplied by the West. There is a rupture in the relationship of large numbers of people with the political media class. There is a fundamental alienation that is going on right now as a result of what is happening in the Gaza Strip. I think that's very dangerous for the future. The events of October the 7th are a case study.
Not just the Gaza Strip.
Traditional media can let us down.
But the West Bank.
We desperately need alternative voices that will genuinely probe
Lebanon,
these things and not simply accept
Syria,
the narratives that are fed to them. For this reason, I think it's enormously important to have outlets like Double Down News, and I would urge you to support Double Down News in any way you can.
Support Double Down News for sure. That was a great video. Support independent media like that. It's really important to have outlets like that and organizations that are willing to step out and take a risk and make a video like that. Sorry. So how much of that video is new to you? I think most of the people that were watching live, it's not very new, but I think to a lot of people that weren't watching live, that are not as plugged in, they may not have necessarily heard all this stuff. And that's one of the reasons why we watch this is because I want everyone to really be on a playing field that this is where the evidence shows there were no beheaded babies. Okay. There was a Hannibal directive. There were Israeli soldiers that fired upon Israeli citizens and intentionally murdered them. And then Israel lied about it and then blamed Hamas the entire time. That the soldiers were pulled off the wall, that they've testified to the fact that they were pulled off surveillance for those 4 hours in the morning that the attack happened. And that was the only time that these soldiers could ever remember that happening in all the time they had served. So there's a lot that I want to make sure is covered and that people have at least a foundation of. So when they do hear the nonsense that comes out of corporate media, they're equipped with the facts and the information to be able to counter that and say, no, that's not what happened. That's what corporate media and the Israeli lobby is trying to get you to believe in order to continue their genocidal war, land theft, and resource theft from the Palestinian people. So, well, Topher, you know what, brother? That is very antiseptic. Maybe it's calling out Israel for the shit it does. That you can call it whatever you like. You can call it peanut butter and jelly sandwich for all I give a shit. It is what it is. So for that, again, we are not going to be remonetized by YouTube. So if you're able to, it means please support independent media, support this channel.
Money, please.
The way to do that, Cash App, $Indie News Network, over at code-fee.com/Indie News Network. That'll pop something up here on screen. You got paypal.me/Indie News Network. IndieNewsNow.com is our website. And then over at the Substacks, we're live at IndieMediaToday.com. We're live over there now. Hi, everybody over there. Seven Sign, I see you over there. Good to see you. I'm glad to be able to finally put your chat up on screen. Reef doesn't care, but other people do, right? And then, and INN Newsletter. We're going to be later. We're going to be live later over there tonight. Tonight is an uncensored boat smashing into other boats. We do a react show after this one in order to eye bleach and kind of forget about all the crap and bad news. And we kind of reset, and Reef pulls some funny stuff, and we'll spend an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours watching dumb, funny videos and get goofy. And at the end of the month, every last Sunday night of the month, we go uncensored, meaning no YouTube. So we can show some of the things that we would ordinarily not show on YouTube, and we'll show it on... Yeah, we can just be
watching Blue's Clues because it's copyright. Who knows, you know?
Well, we don't advertise that, but we just say it's things that YouTube may not want us to be showing, but other platforms don't seem to mind as much. So we're gonna do that afterwards. But in the meantime, I have a really long fuck Israel segment this week, so everybody buckle up because this is going to take a little while. Oh, and let me switch back to the slideshow. So slideshow off. Actually, no, slideshow on. There we go. Okay. Consortium News, another Indie Media Award honoree, one of the top outlets. They did a refresh on their WordPress website earlier this year. Go support them. I believe they're doing a fund drive. They are a 501c3, so all your donations there are tax deductible if you do choose to do so. Patrick Lawrence is one of their exclusive writers that they feature. He's also over on Substack at The Flautist, but he's been censored on Twitter for years, since the Jack Dorsey days. All right. And he wrote this article that I thought was interesting, and from the perspective of being Jewish myself, I don't really get, I try not to aggrandize the position of here's how it's affecting Jews worldwide, because who gives a shit, number one. Number two, it's being done and facilitated in the name of Judaism. So while, yes, it's bad, it's up to Jews to call that out, and I do regularly. But so what he's saying is, here's a letter, this very welcome letter marks out the significantly worsening alienation between world Jewry and the Zionist defacement of the Judaic tradition. And we've been saying very often, Zionism is not Judaism, Judaism is not Zionism. That's the first thing that we say all the time, is that the Zionists have twisted the Jewish religion, which had existed for thousands of years before Zionism, to turn it into and morph it into this ultra-nationalistic, disgusting, racist, apartheid, whatever you want to call ideology, political ideology, that they then utilize and twist as a religion. So Patrick Lawrence writes this special to Consortium News. At last, Jews with powerful voices have gathered en masse. A critical mass, I would say, to condemn Israel and the savage spree of murder, starvation, and terror it inflicts as we speak upon the Palestinians of Gaza and the occupied territories of the West Bank. Honestly, I would say not loudly enough. You may by now be aware of the open letter signed by the 450 plus American, European, and Israeli Jews and made public this week. In it, this sprawling group of distinguished personages denounces the criminality of the Zionist regime and asserts the universality of justice and the fair and equal application of international law. The signatories also call for the international community to impose immediate sanctions on apartheid Israel. When you've got Jews that are out there calling for sanctions on Israel, that means something. That's a statement. And that's what he's saying. This is very big in my read. And I say this not because of what's in this document. Calls for justice of this kind are by now many, but straight to my point, whose names are in it? He said, you may know of this letter and you may not. I ought to add that The Guardian reported it in its October 22nd edition. Okay. The Turkish Wire Service, AA, also had the story right away. Arab News had it. So did Middle East Monitor, and the New Indian Express and Stateside Common Dreams even picked it up. Indie Media Award honoree. In Britain, Jewish Voice for Liberation picked it up. But the British Daily is at writing alone, okay, among Western major Western media to report on this momentous call for worldwide action against the Zionist state. We read nothing of it in major Western media, no surprise, and hear nothing from mainstream broadcasters. Of course not. They're under orders. I'll return to this important point shortly. Join the Worldwide Jewish Call, the letter is titled. It was organized and put out by an apparently ad hoc coalition called Jews Demand Action. Now remember that subversive groups are also funded sometimes, and they also fund both sides of an opposition, and kind of, I want to hear more about this. The document and various appendages explaining it are here. All right. As the Jews Demand Action website makes clear, the intent is to announce a continually engaged movement in the cause of justice. Fair justice for Palestinians, justice for the Zionist fanatics guilty of perpetrating a genocide, which is a term that the group uses with obvious conviction and also with obvious anger. I can understand why. Among much else, the letter features a form by way of which Jews can sign the petition and receive updates on actions to come. I would not advise signing that petition, because God only knows where your information is going to go at that point and what kind of list you're going to get on at that point. Quote, at last, a serious global Jewish call for sanctions on Israel. JVL came out and proclaimed, yes, at last. Lots of other Jews have stood publicly against the apartheid state, many for a long time. There's Rabbi Yaakov Shapiro, right? The wonderfully outspoken rabbi and author of The Empty Wagon, which is Zionism's journey from identity crisis to identity theft. There's the aforementioned Jewish Voice for Peace and the Jewish organizations and students that are active on university campuses and the streets of major cities. Unqualified praise to them and the many like them I cannot list in full. And we were behind them 100% when they were protesting and sleeping on college campuses, trying to convince people that this was something serious, that their futures were impacted, and they wanted to see this ended. And they didn't want their universities funding this and investing their endowments in this. Patrick Lawrence, again, the flautist, continues for Consortium News. I have no certain idea why it took these hundreds of influential people with self-evident consciences so long to join these others against the entity that insists on calling itself the Jewish state. That's where I'm with him. The hazardous surmise, The past 2 years of Israel's unspeakable barbarism have surely been a torment for the signatories of this letter, as for countless Jews the world over, as they've sought to distinguish their faith and their traditions from the conduct of the ultra-nationalist regime that's supposed to merit their allegiance, but has emphatically lost it. Yes. If I had to choose one sentence in this letter above all others for its significance and power, I would rather not, but I will. It would be this, quote, "Our solidarity with Palestinians is not a betrayal of Judaism, then, but a fulfillment of it, because you're supposed to love your neighbor." After this truth comes these. Quote, "When our sages taught to destroy one life is to destroy an entire world, they didn't carve exceptions for Palestinians. We shall not rest until this ceasefire carries forward into an end of occupation and apartheid." Unquote. This is the conceptual frame within which the signatories address Antonio Guterres, the UN Secretary General, as well as, quote, "presidents, prime ministers, heads of state, and permanent representatives to the United Nations." A strongly worded letter. While approving of the ceasefire, or what remains of it at this point, the strongly worded letter states, quote, "and yet there should be no doubt that this ceasefire is fragile. Israeli forces remain in Gaza. The agreement makes no reference to the West Bank. The underlying conditions of occupation, apartheid, and the denial of Palestinian rights remain unaddressed. And oh yeah, right of return also remains unaddressed." The letter continues and says, quote, "As Jews and human beings, we declare not in our name." Then it lists the 4 key demands that the signatories advance in their names. And at least this one has a demand. Respect for the authority of the International Court of Justice. Yes, but respect my authority. Really? A rejection of the complicity that Western governments have forced upon their citizens. Okay. A full military withdrawal. Absolutely. And the supply of aid and everything else needed to reconstruct Gaza. And then finally, of course, to refute false accusations of anti-Semitism that abusively deploy our collective history to tarnish those with whom we stand together in the pursuit of peace and justice. Yes, again, times 10. Yes, not using the definition of anti-Semitism being anyone that opposes Israel's apartheid and murdering of Palestinian babies. Yes, absolutely. You find some big names among the signatories, and the letter doesn't give the full list. Daniel Levy, who was previously a peace negotiator for Israel and now a prominent critic. You got Gabor Mate and Wallace Shawn, Peter Bienert, Naomi Klein, and Amy Eilberg, an American rabbi and activist. Right? Yuval Abraham, who co-directed No Other Land. Right? And that's the Oscar-winning film. And I believe that his Palestinian director was murdered by Israel. Bassel Adra. If I do not put the point too simply, these people speak not for the destruction of Israel, but for its restoration to sanity, and so its salvation. They don't mention the two-state solution in their letter, but one gains the impression it is this for which they hope. One may differ strenuously with them on these points, as I do emphatically, as do I. But what I will shorthand as their moderation is part of what makes their open letter so important. These, again, are shorthand mainstream Jews. I would dispute that. Gabor Mate, I cannot consider to be a mainstream Jew. I wish that were the truth, but he's still considered to be French, I would say, in his opposition of Israel. In even being the son of a Holocaust survivor, he still is not really mainstream. Most Jews don't even know who he is. At least none that I know. But who can say how carefully or how many presidents, prime ministers, UN reps will even consider this letter? I would guess not many. This isn't the salient point. I wonder if Jeffrey Sachs signed off on this letter. My guess would be yes. This letter marks out the significantly worsening alienation between world Jewry and the state that's supposed to represent its home. And in so doing, it widens and deepens the already evident isolation of the Jewish state, even though, again, it's not a Jewish state. This latter effect may not be the intent of the open letter signatories, but it will prove unmistakably to be among the document's consequences. Okay. Right? And it talks about, this letter says, we represent the growing consensus of world Jews, not the Israeli government, the letter declares in one of its subheads. Exactly so. And as the Guardian piece cited above points out, that the open letter should be read alongside some stunning numbers coming out of the most recent opinion polls. In a recent Washington Post survey, 61% of American Jews think that Israel has committed war crimes in Gaza. Again, I think the other 40% are fucking blind and lying to themselves or buried their head in the sands. Just under 40% stand with the open letter signatories. We witness a genocide. The other 60% are lying to themselves. Because if it were happening to anyone else, they would absolutely declare it to be a genocide. But because Israel's doing it, it's a double standard. And that's what pisses me off. On top of course, Israel murdering everyone there. In a poll that doesn't distinguish between Jews and non-Jews, the Brookings Institution, which I can't stand, mainstream Democratic Party bullshit, finds that 45% of those surveyed think that Israel is committing genocide. And remember, these are people that are trying to shoehorn their way into the opposite in results. They don't want even these results coming out. These are really bad for their donors and their constituents. I don't even know why they put them out, honestly. A recent poll conducted by Quinnipiac indicates 50% of registered voters agree. Among Democratic voters, the number is 77%. But yet, the checks continue to flow, and just like 87% of Democrats want Medicare for all, and that shit ain't happening. 77% of American Democrats think that Israel is committing genocide, and yet the money continues to flow. On Thursday, Reuters published a survey indicating that 59% of the Jews and non-Jews polled think the U.S. should recognize Palestine as a sovereign state. Again, what does that mean exactly? What land do they actually get? Do they get to control a military? Do they get to elect themselves a government that actually can negotiate anything? Or are they just a puppet to be dictated to by D.C.? I think that that's really what they want, is recognizing it. And we talked about what recognizing it really means, which is bullshit. Giving them their own real state and allowing them to exist as a state is what we do. And the truth is that the state should be all of it. And Israel should live side by side. Anyone that wants to live side by side with the Palestinians is free to stay. If you can't do that, the fuck out, because that ain't your home. Patrick continues, I see a highly significant conflict. Go ahead.
I never understood, like, I mean, you've talked about this too, like, technically with the Holocaust, shouldn't we give them back Germany and like other parts of that region? You know?
Yes. And I believe that the excuse among Zionists, number one, is that it's too traumatic for the German Jews because they were genocided there, that to take that over and build a homeland on their bones is kind of fucked up. But to do it on the Palestinians' bones is no better.
I mean, it's their bones, like right? Like that's what I don't get.
Number one,
if you got to run the country that fucked you over like that, you'd
build
be like
graveyards and museums and tributes and all. I totally yes, And not only that,
Right.
but why wouldn't the United States at that point, if you're so insistent on the Jews having a homeland, give them North Dakota? Nobody gives a fuck about North Dakota anyway, right? Montana. Like, Uganda.
Knowing what they're willing to do now.
No, but they wanted Jerusalem.
If they did get, control over Germany, no, we know. But, like, they probably would have started putting the fucking Germans in the camps. Like,
right. And then there's the whole, Israeli, there's whole Jews committing terrorism in Islamic countries throughout the 1930s in order to justify and create this narrative that, hey, there's only one safe place. We have to build a safe place because there's nowhere else safe for Jews in the world. Right. So, again, Patrick continues that he sees a highly significant conflict growing ever sharper between the increasing number of outspoken Jews of conscience and those many, and they remain very many, who continue to defend the righteousness of the Israeli terror machine. These are getting especially awkward for mainstream media, such as the Zionist-supervised New York Times, and we did a long story about how Zionist they are, wherein we find no mention of Jews demand action in its forthright open letter. The paper of record decided not even to mention it. Like, who was it? Double Down News said that one of the things they do is they just choose to ignore it, and that's a tactic. This cannot end well for the Times and all the pilot fish that follow. However long the Times stays silent, however many media billionaire Zionists take over and corrupt, however many Barry Weisses they put in high places, and we've covered that too, this will do nothing other than discredit these media in time. It may work for now. They're effectively complicit in the Zionist defacement of the Judaic tradition. Not that they give a fuck. This is another way that the open letter is important. And again, you guys covered the history of Zionism. Theodore Herzl was an atheist. He wasn't even a Jew. The world has long and urgently needed to hear from the we whose names are on this letter. Non-Jews need to learn of and make the distinction between Judaism and the frenzied Zionism that now rules Israel, so they can think clearly of these questions. And as they are well aware, those Jews who reject Israel's ultra-nationalist Zionism must make themselves heard for the sake of Judaism too. My, again, question is, where the fuck have they been for 2 years? Because we've been talking about this for 2 years. I don't accept that any great wave of anti-Semitism is breaking upon us. I agree with that. There is no ferocious surge in Joe Biden's preposterous phrase, but the potential for such a turn, given the extent of Israel's inhumanity in combination with its claim to be the Jewish home, is obvious. The Zionist hordes love the threat of anti-Semitism. How well it serves their pernicious purpose. Shmuley is their absolute dream. At last, this insidious ruse is countered by those whose voices count most, the voices of Jews. And again, I disagree with this. The voices of Jews don't count most. Fuck that shit. Like, it's just the people that they're claiming to do this in the name of are finally speaking out and saying no. But again, where the fuck have you been for 2 years? It's about time is more like the way I would word this and phrase this, other than being so, oh my God, thank you so much. This is such a monumentous, important thing. My question is, where the fuck you been? And it's about fucking time. Welcome to the party, pal. All right. Next, we got Alia Moro. All right. 17 seconds. She was on one of these flotillas, by the way. Footage of Israel blowing up homes in Rafah today. The demolition and destruction has not stopped despite the quote-unquote ceasefire. Remember, what it means is that you cease and Israel continues to fire.
Yep.
There weren't people in there. They're just destroying the potential of living in anywhere that may be in those buildings. Disgusting. Ethnic cleansing. Genocide. keep denying it. I don't give a fuck. Then we got this piece from Bondo Weiss. Israel returns 195 bodies to Gaza, many mutilated with hands bound and signs of torture. Again, for anyone squeamish, we might have some pictures in this one that you might want to turn away from. But yes, Mastermind, I thought there were only supposed to be 140,000 chosen people. I don't even know if there are that many left at this point. Like, the whole story. I'm so disgusted by all of it. I just abolish religion entirely, I say. And that makes the Christians very upset. And I'm sorry to say, but more people have been murdered in the name of religion than anything else in the history of mankind. And it's pointless, useless, and it's gotten us nowhere. So the Gaza Ministry of Health published the photos of the mutilated bodies of the Palestinian prisoners. Most of them showed clear signs of torture, hands and feet bound, blindfolded, bodies showing marks of tank tracks, which we showed last week. All right. Burns, fractures, and deep wounds. This is from Tariq Hajjaj, and this was from Thursday. All right. Look at all those bodies. It's just disgraceful. The Gaza Government Media Office announced on Wednesday morning the burial ceremonies of 54 unidentified Palestinian bodies that the Ministry of Health had received from Israel through the Red Cross as part of the ongoing exchange of deceased prisoners during ceasefire between Israel and Hamas, when Israel is continuing to murder Palestinians daily. Since it was impossible to identify the disfigured and mutilated bodies, they're all being buried in a mass grave, the government media office said. Since October 14th of this year, the Gaza Health Ministry has received the bodies of over 195 deceased Palestinian prisoners. Remember that they've been holding over 10,000 Palestinians in Israeli tortured prisons and dungeons, many without charge.
Yep.
Again, the majority of the bodies show clear signs of torture, including bullet holes fired from point-blank range, bruises, and signs of mutilation. Several bodies were received with their hands tied behind their backs, several more with blindfolds over their eyes. Health Ministry also said that several bodies showed signs of strangulation from hangings, with ropes found tied around the bodies' necks still, while others bore marks of tank tracks. Other bodies were found with missing organs, according to these health officials. Mondo Weiss received, reviewed, and verified photographs of some of the mutilated bodies from the Gaza Ministry of Health. They are horrific and show clear signs of torture. The Ministry of Health has uploaded several photos and the mutilated bodies online and made them available to the families of people who went missing during the war in hopes that they might identify them. We strongly advise that readers proceed with extreme caution if viewing the Ministry of Health photos. They are extremely disturbing and graphic. And for those reasons, Mondo Weiss has decided not to republish them, but sharing them on a link to a Google Drive folder there. I'm not going to show them. Of the 195 bodies, only 57 have been identified so far. During the burial ceremony of the 54 unidentified, the government media office's director said that the bodies that had been received were held for a period of 5 days to allow for forensic examinations. As rudimentary as they could possibly do, I'm guessing. When none of the families with missing loved ones were able to positively identify the bodies, they were handed over to the Department of Endowments for burial. Forensic teams found martyrs with their hands. We heard the quotes. They were buried in numbered graves in Deir al-Balah in central Gaza earlier this morning, between cinder blocks. Families whose loved ones went missing during the war have flocked to Nasser Hospital in Khan Yunis in the hopes of identifying them and finding some closure. Health authorities gather family members in large rooms and display pictures of the bodies. Again, we showed that last week. Richard Medhurst tweeted that out, showing them disfigured and mutilated. The families have to sit through the images and try to find identifying features on the bodies, which, can you imagine having to do that? In video testimony obtained from Mondo Weiss, Wahaba Shabbat stands in shock in Nasser Hospital after identifying the body of her son, Mahmoud Shabbat, 34, who went missing on October 7th, 2023, more than 2 years. Wahaba later learned that Mahmoud had been one of the fighters who had crossed into Israel on that day. She says they want to honor him with a dignified burial. He chose this path and was free to do so. All we want to do is give him a final resting place, nothing more. Now I can say I am at peace after knowing what happened to my son. And remember that when a people are occupied, resistance is justified. So they can call him whatever they want to call him. He was a resistance fighter in the international community's eyes. Wahaba said that the body arrived naked, disfigured, showing signs of torture all over his body. His head was crushed, his face was shattered, and he had broken limbs. Yeah, and that's blurred out, thankfully. All right. When I saw pictures of the missing, I suspected that one of the photos might be of my son. I immediately came to the hospital after a family member showed me their photo on their phone. I examined his body and found the mark on his head that I knew would be there. He had been injured in the head during the Great March of Return in between 2018 and 19, a period in which Israel maimed, wounded, or killed over 30,000 Palestinians protesting at Gaza's border fence. Unarmed Palestinians walked up to the fence and were murdered, just mowed down once they got within a certain distance of the fence line. He underwent several operations and the scars remained. I recognized him immediately and collapsed with the sight of the condition his body arrived in. She explains that before identifying him, she had repeatedly described him to the doctors at Nasser Hospital until his identity was confirmed. Quote, I was shocked by the severity of the torture he suffered. All this torture on one young man. They even returned him naked without dignity. Explaining that the signs were apparent because the body had not undergone decomposition as it had been frozen solid. So they've been holding him since October 7th in a freezer somewhere. His bones were fractured. His feet showed clear marks of being chained. His hands were tied behind his back. There was a bullet wound to his head, so he was executed. And a rope was around his neck. It was clearly visible. They executed him without mercy. Wahaba went on to say that not a single bone had been left intact on his face. Even in the worst wars, torture doesn't reach this level, she said. The resistance took prisoners from the Israeli army to Gaza and kept them for 2 years. Look how they were returned to their families, alive, walking, talking, not mutilated or tortured to death. So why are only our prisoners killed in cold blood and returned to their families like this, broken and tortured, tied up and strangled? Because of Amalek. That's why. Because Bibi Netanyahu, blame it on the Bibi. But not just the Bibi, the Likud and Gallant and Ben Gvir and all the hardline extremist terrorists. In the courtyard of the medical complex, Majaya Kadela stands in front of the main entrance. Lucky she didn't get bombed, staring at the photos of the bodies displayed by the Ministry of Health. Again, thankfully, we have a ceasefire, quote unquote, happening. She scrutinizes each image as she searches for her son who went missing since the afternoon again of October 7th. Whenever she hears new bodies have been returned, she immediately rushes to the hospital to see if her son's among them. They just want closure. They're these mothers. Even if they return a small piece of flesh, that'll be enough for me to honor and bury him. You just keep seeing this again. Disfigured, beyond recognition. You keep seeing the same story over and over and over again. Fuck Israel. Now, We all know indie media award honoree Lee Camp. He's been around a while, right? Lee Camp is incredibly censored and suppressed. But for some reason, they allowed this one to get through. And this one's got over 24,000 likes. It's the most I've seen him get in a long time, honestly. And it's not his map. This came from Al Jazeera. But he says, kind of amazing that Israel has ethnically cleansed over half of Gaza, and no one in our media mentions that Israel has ethnically cleansed over half of Gaza. All right? That this yellow line has now been established, and this is the new Gaza. Is this clear section, beige, inside the yellow line, that Israel has taken all of this territory, at least a mile or more in, from every line. In this case here, 0.9 miles right there. All right, near Deir al-Balah. But in other cases, 4 miles in the south. And of course, 1.25 miles in from Rafah. That's a war crime. That's a war crime.
Yep. One of the many.
Then we have this one. I actually grabbed this from Israel Palestine News, but this was one of the things that they referenced. Invasions, violations, and abductions across the West Bank. Like I said, this isn't happening just in Gaza, but it's also happening with impunity and without really people paying attention across the West Bank. Occupation forces and illegal paramilitary Israeli colonizers invaded multiple Palestinian cities, towns, and refugee camps across the occupied West Bank late Thursday evening and into Friday. Israeli forces abducted 4 Palestinian civilians in Hebron in the southern West Bank after invading their homes, conducting searches, and ransacking their belongings. So they move in the house, they trash it, conduct a search, and then they arrest without charge the people who own the home. Local sources identified that the detainees. Occupation forces also stormed several homes belonging to the Al-Atrash and Al-Rajabi families and others in Hebron. They erected multiple military roadblocks at the entrances to the city and its surrounding towns, villages, and refugee camps, and blocked several main and side roads using iron gates, concrete blocks, and earth mounds. So they're cutting them off street by street. Israeli soldiers also invaded Al-Farah refugee camp, south of Tubas in northeastern West Bank. This is all illegal. They're not supposed to be doing any of this. And nobody's reporting it. Media sources reported, except for Israeli media, because they don't give a shit, that military patrols entered the camp from its northern area with infantry units spreading through its alleys. Several homes were stormed and ransacked, again, trashed, before the forces withdrew toward the Hamra military roadblock. So we'll just go in and trash your place and split. In addition, the army invaded Al-Qadir town, south of Bethlehem, focusing on the Al-Balu area, where they stormed and searched a residential apartment. No abductions there were reported. And you have footage, right, of vehicles arriving. And obviously, those are IDF. Hamas does not have vehicles like that. Right? In Tulkarem, in the northwestern West Bank, Israeli forces did abduct former political prisoner Malek Saada Jalad, 50, from the Urta suburb south of the city after breaking into his home and vandalizing its contents. Par for the course. Meanwhile, back in the Hall of Injustice, illegal Israeli paramilitary colonizers set fire to several civilian vehicles in Deir Dibwan, that's east of Ramallah in the central West Bank, right? So let's get footage of that. Local sources reported that colonizers attacked at the Al-Tal neighborhood and torched vehicles parked outside Palestinian homes. Where are you getting this stuff? Nobody else is reporting on this. In Nablus, in the northern West Bank, maybe Electronic Intifada, maybe the guys at Bet Beat, maybe Fiorella and Vanessa Bealey and Eva Bartlett. Nobody else is reporting this kind of stuff. Several armored Israeli military vehicles invaded the city in Nablus and Balata refugee camp, firing live rounds, gas bombs, and concussion grenades. Again, against a defenseless people for the most part. And you've got footage there. Through like a narrow alleyway because they don't want to get caught. On Friday morning, colonizers assaulted Palestinian olive harvesters in Beit Dajan, east of Nablus. The attack occurred in the Khalet al-Katil area north of town, where colonizers prevented farmers from continuing their harvest. I saw a horrible photo of a colonizer literally beating down a Palestinian woman for harvesting her olives. Olive pickers across the West Bank faced repeated assaults by colonizers and occupation soldiers who block access to farmland and obstruct harvesting. Last month alone, Israeli colonizers carried out 490 documented violations targeting Palestinian villages and Bedouin communities, and nobody's going to do shit about it. These attacks are concentrated in Hebron Governorate, 127, Ramallah Governorate, 122, and Nablus, another 115. Again, who's stopping this? Palestinian Authority is supposedly working with people, right? Then we have this video. This is a woman named Layla Higazi. She was on one of the flotillas. She's got 2 minutes talking about what it was like to be in an Israeli camp in the prison. Let me turn this up and go.
I'm here to record a message in my jammies because that's how I plan to live for a little while. And before I can organize my thoughts on what it was actually like being in Israeli detention, and of course talk more about that because we need to get every single Palestinian hostage out of these horrific conditions, I want everyone to know about a banner that was hung up in the women's prison in the yard. It's likely an AI-generated image. It shows the ruins of Gaza, rubble on one side, rubble on the other side, and then through the rubble, there's like this path where I'm presuming that Israeli soldiers are the ones walking through it. It's kind of hard to tell because it's like an aerial view. It's like this weird, hopeful sky, like a new dawn kind of sky, if you can imagine this. And in Arabic, on the banner, it says, "The New Gaza." And then, of course, underneath this banner, there's like a giant Israeli flag in the yard. They want Palestinian hostages to see this when they're detained. And obviously it's in Arabic for a reason.
Psychological torture.
They've been saying the quiet part out loud for so long. So if this doesn't show you that it's never been about Hamas, it's never been about hostages, Israeli hostages, it's never been about any of the things that they say it's about, and that it's only an attempt to ethnically cleanse Palestine, here's your evidence. Obviously, I was in prison, so I can't show you a picture of this banner, but it was there. And yeah, I want to hear more of the prisoners, hostages who were in detention with me talking about this, because this shit is insane. These people are insane. It's a depraved society, and the world needs to know. So, I'm here.
Yep. So, I
heard somewhere a saying about
in my jammies.
They cry in Hebrew, lie in English, and threaten in Arabic. Right? Like,
Powerful.
And that's the only time they ever use Arabic is.
I would say that they cry in English, threaten in and then
as well.
And, they're bombastic in Hebrew and threaten in Arabic for sure. But sure.
Yeah.
Speaking of being in captivity, this guy, and this is a really long article. I'm not going to read through the whole thing. Margaret Flowers, who is the editor over at Popular Resistance, another Indie Media Award honoree 2022, one of the best outlets out there still. She shared this to her Facebook. I had seen it. It came through, I believe, also on the Indie News Now website. Welcome to Hell, Remembrances of Time in an Israeli Prison. And there are actually two parts to this article. This is just one part, and you can see how long it is. All right, this is from the Gaza Freedom Flotilla Shipmates on the Conscience. This was, I believe, from the most recent flotilla, right? All roads lead to Ketziot. I believe that's the prison, right? And he talks about some of the conditions, right? That they loaded the bus with us. Don't take your blindfold off. They have a camera. They're recording everything we're saying. I recognize the voice of the activist sitting next to me. He's a big guy, well over 6 feet tall. I was squashed into the corner of the last row of the bus. I tried to sit sideways to get more room. The steel seats of the bus made that difficult. It was uncomfortable. At least they didn't zip tie my hands too tightly. It must have been well after midnight when the bus started moving. We were all tired. I dozed fitfully, the whine of the bus transmission in my ears. At one point, I woke up in a panic. I had removed my blindfold while half asleep. The camera. I desperately tried to refit the blindfold over my eyes with clumsily zip-tied hands. It worked. Thankfully, no guards appeared. I guess no one was monitoring the camera very closely. Perhaps the guards were asleep as well. And of course, now we just dropped the frame. How to sleep in such conditions, right? It's simply a question of exhaustion. My head pitched forward, chin to my chest. I was going to get some rest. Just at that point, the bus hit a huge pothole and my face slammed down on the back of the seat in front of me. Ow. I bit my lip quite badly. I tasted blood. The inside of my lip was shredded. I was thankful I didn't break any teeth. There would be no more sleep on this ride. And this begins again his time in an Israeli torture prison. All right, I ate my jelly sandwich under the cover of darkness in our cell. All right, nothing from the Israelis, certainly a valid point. Right. We were finally led to our cell. It stank of urine, consisted of 4 bunk beds in a room and a separate bathroom with a filthy toilet. There was a sink with a working faucet, which was our source of water for washing and drinking. There was a camera on the back wall mounted up high, close to the ceiling. We were being observed. We received towels, a small toothbrush, toothpaste, and 3 small packets of liquid soap, which proved impossible for me to open. Of course, the bunks were noisy because they were supported by a steel sheet that flexed when one rolled over in bed. Boom! It sounded like a poorly constructed gong or something. I quickly learned to lie still. So I'm not going to, again, read this whole article. This is a long story, and if you want to get triggered and read just how bad it is, how bad it was for the people that were in these prisons, go read this over at Popular Resistance. Fuck Israel for that. And also for this, from Dave DeCamp at Anti-War News, not a surprise, though they'll deny it, Israel has only allowed a fraction of the agreed-upon aid to enter Gaza, according to the World Food Program. Again, that's Jose Andres. That's CIA-friendly brother. All right, and this was from Tuesday. Israel has allowed just a fraction of the agreed-upon number of aid trucks to enter Gaza under the ceasefire deal, according to officials in the Strip. They have no reason to lie. Under the ceasefire agreement, Israel pledged to immediately allow the commencement of full entry of humanitarian aid and relief, at minimum of consistent with the January ceasefire deal. under which they agreed then to allow 600 a day. According to Gaza's government media office, Israel has allowed just 15% of the trucks to enter. And remember, they're still all lined up at the Rafah gate. They're sitting on the Egyptian border waiting to come in. We confirmed that the total number of humanitarian aid trucks that have entered the Gaza Strip since the ceasefire has reached 986 out of the 6,600 that were supposed to enter until Monday evening, according to what's agreed upon. Now, remember, though, that this resolution was not agreed upon by Israel or Hamas. They didn't sign it. Data from UN 2720 Monitoring and Tracking Dashboard, which is a mechanism created last year to monitor aid shipments into Gaza, shows that from October 10th until the 21st, only 853 aid trucks have reached their intended destination in Gaza. Isn't that nice? The media office added that on average, 89 trucks were entering Gaza per day. That's 1/6. The continued policy of strangulation, starvation, and humanitarian blackmail practiced by the occupation. The more things change, the more they stay the same. The UN World Food Program has also said that food supplies to Gaza have ramped up since the ceasefire, but are still well below the target. They said its target was for 2,000 tons of food to enter Gaza per day, but only 750 are entering. We've been able to get this to scale up. All right. In order to do that, we have to use every border crossing point right now. But of course, just 2 of the Israeli controlled border crossings were operational, one in central Gaza and one in the south. Oh, okay. But they still have yet to open Rafah. So all those trucks that are sitting in Rafah could come in if Israel just opened that up. And if they did, I believe they might still have to bulldoze a road now because they've bombed the entire road. Atefa added that the food supplies that have entered Gaza are enough to feed 500,000 people, or a quarter of Gaza's population, or about, I would say, a third, for 2 weeks. And that many people are rationing because they fear that the supplies are going to be cut off again. They eat part of it. They ration and keep some of the supplies for an emergency because they're not very confident how long the ceasefire will last and what will happen next. And who can blame them? Man, fuck Israel for all of this. It's just depraved. It's disgraceful. It's disgusting. I don't even have the words to describe all of it. And let's not forget the complicity of the U.S. and the U.K., namely, and this is Indie Media Award honoree Declassified UK, continuing their coverage of the spy plane missions, which remain active in Cyprus after the Gaza mission ends, right? So aircraft contracted to look for hostages continues to fly from the UK base despite the ceasefire, with drones also spotted. Why are these drones and why are these planes circling Cyprus? That's weird. A spy plane hired by Britain's Ministry of Defense to surveil Gaza has continued flights over the main Mediterranean after its mission ended last week. But what's interesting again is that the manned spy plane is known as Crook 12 is owned by the Sierra Nevada Corporation, which I still contend likely has some connections to Israel, Adelson, Mossad, etc., etc. Allegedly. I have not found any direct evidence and links, but I haven't dug any very deeply. My guess is they're not even trying to hide it. It spent several hours flying in circles off the coast of Cyprus this Monday, and last Friday, Royal Air Force drones have also been operating in the same area since the ceasefire. What are they doing out here? Oh, and how interesting that they go into a five-point star pattern also. Crooks 12 was part of a fleet of planes used by Britain's Royal Air Force to surveil Gaza since December of 2023. And Declassified has reported on this before, as we covered on this show. Officially looking for hostages, no information has been released about whether they found anyone, with mounting concern that intelligence shared with Israel could have contributed to attacks on civilians. Could have. Its sister plane, Crook 11, once left its tracker on over Gaza, revealing it flew just 3 streets away from a house that was bombed by Israel hours later, killing 34 civilians. Quote, the faces of dead children were crushed in a way that no mind or heart can describe. If there's evidence that a British recon plane participated in the massacre committed against us, then Britain is complicit in the genocide. Of course! Not to quote a horse-loving douchebag named King. This pair of Crook planes appeared on flight tracking websites between Cyprus and Gaza 133 times since they were first deployed in December of 2024, Declassified has found. That's a lot. The Royal Air Force has deployed its own fleet of Shadow R1 surveillance planes over 600 times from Cyprus during the war in Gaza, or you mean the massacre orchestrated by Israel in Gaza, according to research by the charity Action on Armed Violence. This suggests, again, that the Ministry of Defense could have launched as many as 739 surveillance sorties relating to Gaza, meaning 739 instances of potential war crimes. The data can't be comprehensive because the Crook planes often restricted the visibility of their trackers, and because they're American planes, they can't be held to a standard. 2 further flights since the ceasefire suggest the Ministry of Defense may intend to keep operating surveillance flights in the eastern Mediterranean. What a shock! Defense Secretary John Healey said this week that a small team of British military personnel have been sent to Israel to help with monitoring the ceasefire. Sure, Jan, that's what they're there for. Quote, without boots on the ground, the team is likely to rely on a combination of drones, surveillance aircraft, satellites, and other sensors to keep watch for any breaches, the Times reported. And oh yeah, the trust me bro from Israel that they always take. It comes as at least 2 RAF Protector drones were seen on a flight tracking website flying from Akrotiri, Britain's airbase in Cyprus. As far as it's publicly known, these flights are the first for RAF Protector RG-1s outside of the UK or US airspace. That's significant. Campaign group Genocide Free Cyprus said on Instagram that the drone flights extend British military influence from a colonial foothold and ensure that the UK remains a key player in regional surveillance, which is exactly what it's trying to do. 3% of Cyprus remains British occupied, despite the island becoming independent in 1960. Were you aware of that? I did not know that.
No, I had no idea.
Referring to the manned spy flights, a defense analyst who asked not to be named told Declassified, quote, I'm still deeply mystified as to why the Israelis needed any intelligence that these planes could detect over Gaza. Mostly because they wanted complicity. They wanted somebody else to do their dirty work for them. It's not a big secret that the Israelis have fleets of drones and signals intelligence and troops on the ground. They have way more capability than anything that those planes could have. Yes, but they also have Israeli flag markings. The Ministry of Defense has refused to answer the questions in Parliament about its contractual relationship with Sierra Nevada. How convenient. Let me guess, citing national security concerns? The Ministry of Defense previously told Declassified that surveillance flights were unarmed, don't have a combat role, and were solely focused on securing the release of the hostages. Sure, Jan.
Sure they were.
They said that the UK
They've
controls
been doing that for the last, like,
2 years,
8 months or whatever it is. Right.
Right. There you go. Las Vegas Sands Corp has reached a deal with federal prosecutors to pay more than $47 million to the U.S. government in order to avoid criminal charges over alleged money laundering activities. That would be the Adelson family that operates in Vegas but doesn't own any hotels in Vegas anymore. They operate hotels in Macau. Thank you, Seven Side, for that. Good night. Revolution continues. Good to see you. Again, the UK claims that they control what information is passed on, and only information relating to hostage rescue, broad term, is passed to the relevant Israeli authorities. We will only pass information where we're satisfied that it will be used in accordance with international humanitarian law. Or where we have plausible deniability. That's the other thing that they won't mention. Fuck Israel. Fuck England. And, you know, I heard Monica Perez on the latest Cognitive Dissonance talked about it, and she said it's really a triangle. It's a trifecta between the U.S., the U.K., and Israel. It's the three of them operating in tandem and in consortium with each other. This is another disgraceful fucking video that I wanted to bring real quick. Let's turn the slideshow off, go full screen. This is a mother clinging to the grave that's being bulldozed by the IDF of her son. You see the bulldozer back there behind them.
Yep.
They're digging up graves of Palestinians. And they're going to read what they're going to do to this area in a second. It's so awful. I mean, half of me, honestly, is surprised that they didn't kind of execute her on the spot and film it disgustingly enough.
Yeah.
There they are digging up.
You ever meet somebody and they're so boring you feel like they poisoned you? Like,
wait,
you're talking to them and you're like, I feel like I'm dying right now.
Sorry, it's just
that.
Yeah.
This is why fuck Facebook.
Sure, fuck Facebook for sure. Just auto playing the next video. I had one more thing to show. All right, and let's turn off the slideshow. Let's turn it back on. Come on. So I'm not showing my screen. This came again from Indie Media Award Honoree 2024, Ricky at Council of State Media. The number one cause of child death on Earth in 2025 is Israel. Read that again. Then read that again. Fuck Israel. And that concludes our Fuck Israel segment for the evening. So thank you for sticking with me on that. We certainly will not be remonetized by YouTube for calling all that out. So again, if you're able to and it means, please support the media you want to see and support channels like this that show you things that are not being shown on corporate media. That's why we go to independents and sources that go as directly as possible. Ways to support this channel: Cash App, $ Indie News Network, ko-fi.com/Indie News Network, paypal.me/Indie News Network, at indienewsnow.com, where we're live. We have a live section there, but we also have a support the media and keep the media free. And that's where you can do a Stripe donation. Also over at Substack, monthly or annual, you can do a contribution there at indiemediatoday.com or at innnewsletter.com. Okay. I have got couple of more things for a lightning round. Then we can get out of here and get to uncensored votes. And remember, no YouTube tonight. It's only going to be Rumble, Kick, and everywhere else. innnewsletter.com will be live over there at Substack, but no YouTube. The first thing that I wanted to mention is that ProPublica has been really making some waves. They published an article about Americans being detained by ICE, which has now prompted a bipartisan joint congressional investigation. That's a good thing. What it will yield, I have no idea. But the fact that they're willing to look into at least 170 U.S. citizens being held by ICE agents this year. That's awful. So that's number one. Go check that out. I'll link that in the description. Our friend of the show, Keith McHenry. Check out my INN one-on-one with him from last year. A co-founder of Food Not Bombs. He writes over at keithmchenry.substack.com this fictional, what could be dystopian article about dystopian digital terror. And a couple people read this and were like, this was frightening, but really good. Thank you for sharing it. And they subscribe to Keith. So support Keith. Subscribe to him over on Substack, keithmchenry.substack.com. So check that out. Third, I also wanted to point out that there was a good article in Black Agenda Report this week from someone named Hannah Eid, who I did not know. All right. And this article was talking about data centers and the AI bubble, which doesn't really surprise anyone. We've been talking again quite a bit about this, the amount of resources that it's accumulating and taking up, but mapping out where these large data centers are happening. And the resources that they are taking, and again, making the argument on both sides. Are these jobs are they gonna replace jobs with AGI? AI skeptics see the AI hallucinations. You mean outright lies, model collapse, mental health crises exacerbated by this tech as evidence of damaging characteristics. Right? Other people see it as a tool. There's a whole conversation about this, right? So read this article. This is really interesting about the demand and the demand for data capacity and data centers. The other article I wanted to mention and recommend that everybody take a look at is from Descent and Bloom, friend of the show. She'll be co-hosting the Justice for Aspen live stream fundraiser on Wednesday night on her Substack. She wrote an article this week. The government is watching your feed, tracing your money, and using AI to decide who to target. And this is, again, a long article that documents, all right, they say it'll never happen to us, but all of a sudden it's gone in the blink of an eye, meaning they're disappearing your neighbors. National security, the next section is that the government is, that's their favorite excuse, their shield, that in the justification of national security, we've got to XYZ. Silence doesn't protect you. It just buys time, and not much of it. You're trading your rights for a man. All right. But what happens when he's gone? Trump won't live forever. She's literally addressing the Trumpers that are defending this. Right. But where does this leave us? So check this one out. I like this article. The only slight criticism I would have is that it does not cite independent sources and cites a lot of Associated Press, corporate media. I think that's also done to be able to potentially try to make the case for those who don't necessarily subscribe to the validity of independent media. And I think that there's value in that for sure. But of course, we try to promote and amplify and use independent voices wherever possible. So check that out from Descent and Bloom. I did want to again mention the GoFundMes. We'll start with Shanda. Shanda again is battling her next round of chemo and radiation and cancer coming back in her liver and in her femur, in her bones, and her legs. And we're trying really hard to prevent it from reaching her brain. For those who don't know about Shanda's story, check out my one-on-one conversation with her over at INN Newsletter. All right. She has gotten zapped like 97 times. There she is with her hair before she has to lose it again. She's back in treatments. And October 7th was her last posting over here when she had started the rounds. She's exhausted. Saturday night, they did a Beauty and the Boomer Halloween special. She looked great. Again, to watch her, you would never know that she's going through this. And fuck cancer for making her go through this and putting her through this. And we love you. We're going to stand by you. We're doing all we can. She's almost at $6,000, just $10 shy of $6,000. All of that helps. Every dollar that you can donate to her GoFundMe helps. So please do that. Support our independent brothers and sisters. Also, I see the Cowboy Kitty, our brothers in chat. His sister-in-law, Natalia, was taken by ICE and put in an ICE facility, locked up, and has been there for months, pending possible deportation over a traffic stop, over a registration violation. Terrible. She's been here 9 years legally, currently in the process of applying for a green card as a box truck driver. She got pulled over for a registration violation. They impounded the car and arrested her, and now they're talking about deporting her to Ukraine, where she left 9 years ago. Been doing all the right things. So please, if you're able to, please support Cowboy Kitty's sister-in-law and donate a couple of bucks to this GoFundMe. Thirdly, we have Justice for Aspen, and we aired last Saturday night on INN the one-on-one that I did with Aspen and her mother, Halo Benson. Aspen is an Assange activist, 27-year-old autistic woman who was in an RV that got pulled over on the way back from a music festival. The festival was in Florida. They got pulled over in Georgia, and the person driving the RV was a drug trafficker, as it turns out, unbeknownst to her, was carrying a massive amount of drugs, enough that it made it worthy of trafficking and federal, and she's facing decades in prison. And we're raising all we can to try to help her with experts and a legal defense fund and get to the next phase of her lawsuit, which at this point is discovery. And this is federal. We don't even know where the lawsuit necessarily will, where the hearing will be, but we've got to get her a lawyer. She's got to hire experts in autism that talk about the effect that autistics have, the effect that prison has on autistics, on how autistics are overly trusting and unable to sense when somebody might be deceiving them. And the testimony of the person who was driving the RV, who admitted that it was not her, that she knew nothing about this and had nothing to do with it. Descent and Bloom wrote an outstanding article about this. We read it on this show a couple of weeks ago. The reading of that article is also here. There's our one-on-one. We set up a link tree that also has a link to the GoFundMe and a teaser trailer for the live stream, which again will be Wednesday night on all of the INN channels. And I'll set up the live stream in the next couple of days for that. We've been using the hashtag Justice for Aspen over on Twitter and on Facebook, but mostly over on Twitter. And there's been a tweet storm happening over there. So thank you to everyone who shared with that. Unfortunately, our brother Charlie Mack, who is one of the main organizers for this Justice for Aspen fundraiser, he got his Twitter account suspended permanently today because of the amount of sharing that he's been doing on this fundraiser, which is insane. We should also be tagging and tweeting at X support to reinstate his account because he did nothing wrong. Twitter. He did not violate anything.
Fuck Twitter.
Fuck Twitter is right. So here is the little fundraiser trailer. Oh, no, that's actually from the one-on-one. Sorry. The fundraiser trailer is in this article. So if you go to Indie Media Today, I put up a post today. All right, join us for a special fundraiser to help with legal expenses. Wednesday, October 29th, 8 p.m. Eastern on all the Indie News Network channels, as well as over at Indie Media Today and at Descent in Bloom on Substack. Misty Winston will have an interview with Halo and Aspen. And Descent in Bloom is also going to join to talk about the article that she wrote and some of the research that she's done. And then Jessie Jett is going to join and perform a half dozen songs and spoken word pieces that Halo and Aspen have requested. And then we're going to open it up to everyone else to donate to the GoFundMe and request a song if you donate to it. And Jesse will do his best to accommodate. Again, the GoFundMe is here. Okay, and I will drop the link in all of the chats for everyone to be able to support that. And again, I've known Halo for several years. Halo has been putting together activist boxes for Assange. She was now doing it for fighting AIPAC and getting AIPAC classified as a foreign lobby and making them register as a foreign lobby. And unfortunately, this has taken her out of doing that organizing, and she feels terrible about it. And I feel terrible for her, but she's got to focus on her family and what's in front of her right now. And we talked for hours this week, one-on-one, just privately. And she said that she thinks that this is some kind of a coordinated effort at anybody that's making a splash, that they're trying to take us all out in some way, shape, or form. I feel terrible about that. And so, yeah, watch the one-on-one if you want to learn more about what had happened and how they got pulled over, more about what happened while Aspen was in that Georgia prison for 15 days while Halo was sleeping in her car outside the county jail, and what we can do now to help her going forward, and just what their research has found about just how difficult things are for autistic people in prison in the United States, just how many autistic people are in prison in the United States, and how woefully insufficient our facilities are to work with autistic people. It's just horrible. So, yeah, Justice for Aspen, Wednesday night. Please join us on all the channels. Please share whatever you can. If you see it on Twitter, go into the Substack for tonight's show. There'll be links to the video, links to the GoFundMe, links to the link tree, and eventually there will be links to the live stream once we have them taken, put together. Shout out to Paula Iacella, Indie Media Award honoree for activism, by the way, 2024, who commented, excellent informative interview. Aspen shines a bright light on the intentional failures of a dark justice, quote unquote, system, focusing on the unjust entrapment of Aspen, who was in the wrong place at the wrong time. And now her family is tangled in a legal web and dealing with a steep financial burden. Despite the despair, the mom, Halo, and Indy, me, discuss practical advice such as programs and training for vulnerable communities to help or avoid and navigate the legal system, all right, which is actively working against all of us, especially those who can't defend themselves. So please share using hashtags Justice for Aspen and hashtag autism, and if possible, donate. QR code for the GoFundMe, okay, link is starting at 8 minutes. It's actually showing just about all throughout that entire video. And again, I dropped it in all the chats so everyone can click on that and donate, hopefully. And then I just want to show again one last time Indie News Now, and I'm going to refresh it because it's constantly updated with new articles as people publish and as outlets publish. Again, you got Mondo Whites, you got JB over on Substack, and Anti-War, and this is just in the last hour. A Skeptic put up their Substack article recently. All right. And Chicho, we show his Rumble videos, and our friend George Hazim over on Substack. Shout out to George. All these articles get pulled in, and I don't pull in the whole article. I link you to the article on the website. I want you to visit those sites and to see and to read it on those sites. This is just like a central place to find all of them and then branch out from there. All right. And of course, merch. Buy my merch right quick. All right. That is the INN shop, which you can get to from Indie News Now. Click on the merch link And you can, again, get INN t-shirts, red tie t-shirts. We deserve better psyops. When people are occupied, resistance is justified.
Look at my shirt, little bitch.
Tank tops. My dial doesn't go to delicate. That's a Jesse Jet t-shirt. All right, we got a ton of different shirts over here. There's your Care Bear. Everybody loves Colin Radix Carter. Get your Care Bear t-shirt. All right, $20. $20. Reasonable. And they even have it in black. You can get it in black too. $20. I think black's $2 more.
Look at my shirt, little bitch.
All right. Go to my website, right. All right, everyone. We're getting ready for Uncensored Boats. We're not going to be over on YouTube tonight, so join us over on Rumble, join us on Kick, join us at INN Newsletter, join us everywhere else but YouTube on the Ocho. And Rumble, we're going to be on INN 8 the Ocho, not on the regular INN channel. So check us out over there. Reef, do you have a link to drop over there? If not, I'll take care of that. I got it here. Okay. Copy link address. You did? You got it. Good. Thank you. All right, everyone.
Let's all go to the lobby
and get ourselves a treat. I need a snack. I need a dab, and then we can get started. So, thank you again, everyone, for hanging. Support independent media because we need it more than ever. I'll see you in 2 weeks. We're off next Sunday, so we'll see you in 2 weeks. I love you all. Have a great night, everyone.
Good night.
Mwah. Ciao, baby.
I'll be back.
No! We just fucking lost the stream!
I think I liked it better being blind, when I couldn't read between the lines, and when I couldn't see the cracks in the structure that lay bare before me the whole time. I think I liked it better back when I suspended disbelief and swallowed pride. I thought I knew the difference in the red from the blue, but they both bleed us so dry. They both bleed us so dry.
My favorite songs don't hit the same way. I get to the end of a 4-minute track and I'm only looking back thinking, what did they actually say?
I guess this isn't such an awful place. Is that what you